thank you so much for coming tonight. We have a very special opportunity, and I'm going to introduce our guest speaker in just a moment. My name is John Rich. I'm the director of the Guild Literary Complex, and tonight we are going to be having a talk about the International Cities of Refuge Network. This is in advance of our entire project called Voices of Protest, where we'll be screening films by Al Jazeera-produced films produced, and it was called Poets of Protest. And we have these poets, a couple of these poets here with us in Chicago, and they'll be reading at Facets Multimedia on Friday at 7 o'clock and Saturday at 8 o'clock. And that information is in your program as well. The Guild Literary Complex is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. So for 25 years, we've been around doing aggressive cross-cultural programming and really thinking about, for a literary organization in the city of Chicago, to how to represent the entire city and how to have all of Chicago on stage and to give voice to all of the diverse ideas and aesthetics and different experiences that populate our city. And for that reason, it's been really important for us to collaborate and reach out to a wide variety of friends. So I certainly want to thank Silk Road Rising for giving us the opportunity to use this space tonight. As an organization, the Guild Complex doesn't have a physical space that we occupy, so we look for meaningful relationships with other organizations, and I definitely want to say that Silk Road Rising does beautiful work, and you've all been given an example of a show that they have on right now, Brahmini, which is about an intersex Indian person, and it's run as a one-person stand-up comedy night, and it goes through May 4th. So I would definitely try to check that out if you haven't had the opportunity yet. And if you did see it, then of course you want to see it again. I'll be here May 2nd, so if you want to chat with me some more, you can always come to Brahmini on May 2nd. I also want to thank the MacArthur Foundation, which provided really the funds and the energy, the capital, to make this project happen. The Guild Literary Complex is a very modest organization. We have 2 staff members, and we do 40 programs a year with those 2 staff members and many volunteers. And so an organization like the MacArthur Foundation really makes it possible for us to deepen our impact and for the first time in many years, invite international artists to share their experiences and deepen the scope of work that we can conceive and think of in Chicago. So thanks to the MacArthur Foundation. And then finally, I just want to note that we did include a flyer for the Chicago Palestine Film Festival, which is happening concurrently to our Voices of Protest project. And we intentionally scheduled, again thinking about other organizations and collaboration, we scheduled our talks and programs adjacent to those programs so that people can do both of them. One of our guest poets, Mazin Maroof, will be reading at the end of the screening of Omar this evening. That show might be sold out, but it's at the Siskel Film Center at 8 o'clock. There will be a reception, a small reception after tonight's talk. There will also be a question and answer, so I invite everyone to stick around, have some light snacks and some water. You're also welcome to bring those into the theater. And then finally, I do want to thank Susan Harris from Words Without Borders, who has been a great contributor and collaborator for this project as well, so thanks for being here tonight. So, finally, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Helge Lunde, who is here from Norway. And he just arrived the other day, and we haven't had a chance to spend a lot of time together, but the thing that I find remarkable about him, and I hope that you do as well, is just his determination to make things happen. So here's a guy who starts a literary festival with a thematic focus on freedom of expression. And if that wasn't enough, he then starts, through collaboration, a project that creates safe haven and refuge for writers who are facing political threats and persecution. And if that's not enough, he's here in Chicago for the first time. So please give him a very warm welcome.
We're going to start with a very short film, so after that I'll be coming to the stage. Okay.
llamaron a la casa para amenazar de que me iban a matar si regresaba. Algo que no es tan, digamos, que no es extraño en El Salvador.
I was thrown into the cells with a swollen lip and of course blood, headache.
حکومت ایران کاری که بلد بود رو انجام داد. این کاری که همیشه انجام میده در قبال اعتراضات، یعنی نشریه رو بست و من رو به سردبیر هفته نامه ایران جمعه کودک رو به سنگ انداخت.
A few years ago, writers from all over the world thought good resolutions and quiet diplomacy at governmental scale were not enough. Under their impulsion, some cities started acting concretely. Throughout Europe and beyond, they decided to offer a temporary shelter to persecuted writers, thus becoming cities of refuge belonging to a transnational network. Today, more than 40 cities and regions belong to this network, constantly growing up, called Icorn.
An increasing amount of persecuted writers from all over the world are applying to get the temporary safe haven in an Icorn member city. The most important reason why more and more cities want to become shelter cities is the creation of win-win situations between the persecuted human rights defender and the city hosting her.
Convaincre les gouvernements, c'est beaucoup plus difficile, naturellement. Mais sur le plan des villes, avec les individus, on peut discuter, on peut convaincre les gens de bouger, de faire quelque chose de concret.
We narrow it down into, let's say, between 6 and 8 cases that, or people that we think could fit this particular city, and then it's actually the city themselves who come back to us and say, this is right. Rocco, they will sign a contract soon?
Yes, I'm going to follow them today.
Yeah, we can start maybe.
Yes, definitely.
Christian's son, there is a change, the writer has arrived, hurrah, hurrah. 6th of September he arrived. He's from Eritrea, and his family is still there. So I guess he will be remain anonymous for a while. And in Mexico, the Cameroon writer has arrived. So very happy. He was in a very difficult situation, and I think that's going to be a coach is very happy.
The Cities of Refuge Network works closely with the International Pen Writers in Prison Committee to confirm the eligibility of the applying writers to the criteria of the Icorn Charter.
Altså Skien kommune vil vel ha en frimurforfatter. Safa vel egentlig ferdig med sin periode. Så det litt sånn dumt å la den plassen stå tomt, tenker jeg også. Nei, det jo altså, han det gjelder sitter jo inne på rommet sitt og gjemmer seg, ikke sant? Fordi at det folk som ute etter ham. Så det derfor det haster at han liksom skal slippe å sitte der og være redd hele tiden, sånn som han jo har vært i. It's getting more difficult to get both intellectuals and artists into Europe. And especially if there is a trace of these people being threatened. Europe is getting very afraid of what they call potential asylum seekers, which is ridiculous because it's your right, it's a human right to seek refuge in another country. It's very strongly in the UN Convention on Refugees.
و این بار که شهرداری من رو دعوت کرد، برای اولین بار تجربه کردم که هیچ وقت نکرده بودم در زندگیم. یعنی رفتم به یک سفارت غربی، خصوصا فرانسه که تا 4 دفعه بدترین شکل من رو ریجکت کرده بود و خیلی محترمانه با من برخورد کردن، خیلی مهربان با لبخند و همون موقع که مدارک رو گرفتن مهر رو زدن به آسونی.
City is a democracy, a democratic institution that's all back to Plato and the old Greece. It should also be a central part of the consciousness of the city.
Good evening, and I will thank the earth of Norwich for being a land of refuge. Maybe not so much the British, but I won't go into the empire, but it's for that reason that I speak English. But please, when you read me, hear my mother tongue.
When you're focused on as a poet or the poet of the season, like I was last autumn, it's great when your book comes out, you can share
I want to go to my mother and ask her to sing me the song of the struggle again.
The main thing with Icorn is to keep these voices going. They absolutely most choose to continue the struggle for a better society where they come from. You have people like Sihan Sabine. The day she knew that the regime was going to fall, she was on the plane. And that's what I believe absolutely most of our writers would do.
Ça a été une ville qui nous a porté chance. C'est une ville qui nous a accueillis chaleureusement. Merci Barcelone.
It's growing and it's a big concern because if the waiting list grows too long, then it takes so long between the application comes in and the placement actually is. So that we need more cities.
Thank you very much for the very nice introduction, John. And I'm very, very glad to be in Chicago. And you know, the last sentence here, I think there's going to be a kind of red thread. We need more cities, and maybe, hopefully, Chicago can be a city that's coming up. This short film is made by a French filmmaker, Marion Stallings. It's just kind of a spin-off product. She made a very strong documentary, Silence or Exile, with 4 guest writers, 2 other writers here and 2 other writers that are in exile. And she's also even more famous, I think, for a very good documentary about her sister, Juliette Binoche, the French actress. But Marion Stallings have been doing a lot of very, very good job for Icorn. So, what really is Icorn? International Cities of Refuge Network. We can see at least all the cities in white here. There are some in red. We have some challenges with the technology, with the visualization, but that's not the most important thing. Icorn is what I used to say, it's a truly functioning network, a network in the real sense of the word, because it is cities working together, fighting for freedom of expression, human rights, for international solidarity and hospitality. These are the very, very good causes and obvious causes that everybody should fight for. But Icorn is a network of cities that have decided to make a difference, to work together for all these values. It's a fully democratic and representational organization. It is the cities themselves who decide about the future, about how the whole organization shall be driven. And every second year there's a general assembly, and it's going to happen in Ljubljana in only a month from now in Slovenia. And then the path for the organization in the next following years will be determined, and it's the city, the member city delegates, the delegates from the member cities who will then decide about how this organization will develop. I'm going to tell you quite a lot, hopefully, about how it all works. Can you please shift? Cities as actors and ambassadors for human rights and freedom of expression. That is the really duty of a city, and by joining an organization like Icorn, a city can really be such an ambassador. I told you about the General Assembly. There's also an executive board. 5, or it might after Ljubljana be 6 delegates from member cities that are elected to represent all the member cities between the assemblies. They are at the moment the delegates, the members in the board are from Kristiansand in Norway, Frankfurt, Norwich, Ljubljana, and the last one will come soon. The administration center is very rightfully, it's in Stavanger, Norway. That's we are 3.5 persons at the moment administering this whole work. but that's the way it's meant to be. It's quite similarly to how the guild here works, because it's not a big administration at this point. The point is that all the good work is being done out in the cities, with all the people voluntary and the people working in the cities, and of course working together with the writers. So, please shift. I'll go a little bit through the history of the whole undertaking. Everything started with Salman Rushdie. There was the fatwa against Salman Rushdie when he wrote the Satanic Verses in 1989. And after that, he started the International Parliament of Writers. It was necessary, as it was, as he was seeing it, and a lot of his colleagues were seeing it, to find a solution, to find an alternative, to find a system that where sort of practical solidarity could be shown towards writers that were persecuted because of their writing. So it was not, Salman Rushdie did not invent it for himself, but he and his colleagues invented it because, yes, there needs to be something like that. And we are still really indebted to Salman Rushdie and to this idea and to how it all started. That was in 1993, and they started an international network of cities of asylum in 1994-95. I think Barcelona was the first member of that network. Coincidentally, also my city, the city of Stavanger, was one of the very first members of what's called INCA, International Cities of Network of Asylum. Sorry, International Network of Cities of Asylum. This network very soon also spread to the US, and Las Vegas was the first US member city of INCA. But after that, Pittsburgh, Ithaca, New York, and a couple of other cities also came in. So it really was a blooming and a thriving network. But in the beginning of 2000, it was administrated first from Strasbourg, then from Paris. When we came to 2003 to 2004, the trouble came up. It was very difficult to run it, and in 2004, 2005, it collapsed. So the International Citizen Network, International Network of Citizen Asylum, collapsed in 2004. So there were many member cities in Europe and in the US also. So we asked ourselves, if it's not possible to run such a thing, what shall we do? How shall we move forward? Shall we just continue separately doing our work as individual cities in solidarity with all the writers, or shall we try anew? Shall we try to learn from the successes and the failures of the former network and start something new? We decided between the former members of this network that okay, it has been proven difficult, but the idea is too good and the importance is so heavy upon us, so we really have to do it. We have to try anew, and we and the city of Stavanger, my city, then got the kind of the duty from the other cities, try to invent, try to start it anew, try to find a way to administrate it. So we did, and in 2006, the Icorn, the International Cities of Refuge Network, was born. So that was the start. Please. What's very special about an Icorn and about being a city of refuge is that it's a very symbolic act to become a city of refuge, but it's also very, very concrete. It's symbolic in that sense, that you as a city send a signal to the world that you want to do something, you want to make a difference, you want to be a city that works for freedom of expression, for human rights, for creativity. But it's also extremely concrete because you are inviting a person, a very special person, to stay among you and who will work in the city and will share his ideas or her ideas with you, and to really do a lot of work all together. So that's really an important point. You're sending, by becoming a city refuge, you're sending a universal signal Send a signal to all the persecuted writers all over the world. Not all writers that are persecuted are able to go to a city of refuge, or able to go out of their countries. But only knowing that a network like this exists for a writer that is under high pressure is very good and has a very good effect, because it might tell this writer that so the writer can think, I can take a lot more chances, because if it's becoming too bad, there is an alternative. So I think it has that, the only by all of the cities forming Icorn, just by being there and being visible, and we can, I think we are having that effect also all together, that to many writers that are out there struggling in their own countries, that a positive signal in that way. And it's also a signal, I think, to the to all the dictators and all the terrorist organizations that are threatening persecuted writers, because we know that that by coming out, finding a safe haven, the writer can do many times a lot more than he or she was able to do whilst he or she was persecuted. So in a way, it also sends a signal to the whole world, and not at least to all the repressive regimes that are persecuting the writers. Safe but not silent, that's the kind of the title also of my speech. So we see more and more examples of exactly what I mentioned. We see that when the writers are coming to a safe haven, to a city of refuge, they only need a computer, internet and everything, and then they can work many times a lot more effectively towards their home countries, to work for human rights and democracy in the home countries from their points of exile. That we have seen as a very, very important point of running a network like this. Of course, it also makes it more complex, because for in most of the cases, the writers coming to a city of refuge, they are not coming forever. It's a temporary system. Icorn is a temporary system, a long-term but temporary system. And when the writers are working so effectively in their cities of refuge, and working and speaking freely and communicating to all the world, they are not getting more popular with the regimes where they were forced to flee from. So, of course, that's also a complication. It's a long-term. I said Icorn is a long-term placement system. The writers are invited to stay for 1 or 2 years. There are some exceptions also from that, but it's temporary. I'll come back to that later. But it was mentioned also in the film, win-win situations is what we are opting for, and that is what we really see many times, I think, and I hope that the writers that are here have experienced it in Stavanger and Reykjavik. We will come back to that as well. I'll just mention one guest writer, one colleague of Manal and Madsen. It's Icorn Kira. She's from Nagaland. That's a small kind of independent republic between India. It's not a republic, but there's people living there between India, Bangladesh, and Burma. Icorn Kira is a poet. She's a novelist, and she's an activist, feminist. And she became kind of in the pressure between the Indian government and between the separatists in Nagaland, so she had to flee. She was invited to the northernest city of refuge in the world, Tromsø, the city of Tromsø, very far north in Norway, very different from Nagaland, but she was a fantastic person, and she did it remarkably there. She had the habit of, every time she meets a person, she writes a poem on that person. So, and she's a very gentle person, but also very sociable in her way. So she started meeting people, and when she had met 150 people, there were 150 poems. So when she, and then there was a book, a nice collection of poetry about, with all poems on and about people from Tromsø, and there was at least 150 buyers of the book, you can imagine. So that was a success always in that sense. It was only one win-win situation, one among very many. These are a photo taken by during our network meeting in Krakow last year. It's a Najati Tayara from Syria. You can imagine we get many applications from Syrian writers at the moment. It's a very, very big challenge. He is now the current guest writer of Paris. He's able to write and work there. He's working with the exile, with the writers and activists in exile, but also communicating with his brothers and sisters in Syria. I talked with him on the phone just the other day. He's struggling a lot. He is totally desperate, of course, with what's happening in Syria, but at least he is out, so he can do his work, and he can work together with his brothers and sisters back in Syria from there. Ali Amar is from Morocco. He's a journalist and writer. He's written about the king of Morocco, and the king didn't like his books, so he had to flee. So he's now the guest writer of Brussels, and working very well, and doing lots of projects in Brussels, but also and it's good for him to be in Brussels because he's working very strongly also with his brothers and sisters inside Morocco. So it's good to be in Brussels then, where the EU at least have some influence, and he is working very actively, writing and fighting for freedom and democracy. Abdelak is a pseudonym. It's a cartoonist. He's living in Skien, Norway at the moment. He's a guest writer there. He had to flee Somalia, and he had really, really heavy threats from Al-Shabaab, the terrorist organization, and sometimes, and that happens, unfortunately, with some of the writers. Sometimes they have to go underground because the pressure against not only them, but against their families back home are becoming intolerable. So that's what happens from time to time. Even though the writers are able to come out, every question, every issue is not solved because the persecutors, the people that are hunting, the people that are afraid of free speech, they are also becoming more and more clever. So we have to strengthen our system to be able to work even harder, to be able to represent this alternative. And then we have Bassem al-Nabris. He is a Palestinian writer. He's now in the city of Barcelona. And I was getting an email today from Barcelona, and I was told to greet you all from the city of Barcelona, because today is also the International Day of the Book. It's celebrated throughout the world, but it's celebrated especially in Barcelona. And Bassem al-Nabris was sitting on the streets in Barcelona. I was given photos also from that, and he was sitting signing the new books. That was his new books. There was a bilingual Catalan and Arabic books of poetry that he was distributing. They were distributing in the streets of Barcelona today. So these are only 4 of very, very many writers that are able to find a city of refuge. Can we have a new slide? I'm just telling a little bit about the variety and the complexity already of a system like ours. There are small cities and large cities. Chiusi is a very nice Etruscan village in Tuscany. They have only 8,000 inhabitants, but they are also supported by the region of Tuscany, of doing a very, very good job. While Mexico City is a little bit bigger, but they have a wonderful institution called Casa Refugio in Mexico City, and they were a member in the old network as well, and that I was referring to, and they are a very active and good member of Icorn. They even have, just mentioning one example, they are even able to, because as you all know, there are many journalists that are persecuted also within Mexico, but they are even able to work for them. Of course, they are within Mexico and they are vulnerable because of that, but we have a case at the moment. We are probably a journalist that is very, very much persecuted because of his writing and fighting about the narco drug cartels, and they are maybe able to help him before he is escaping and coming into a city refuge outside the country. So we are very, very proud and glad for Mexico City, and Mexico City is also the gateway, hopefully, to Latin America for Icorn. Philip Olera-Prun, who is the director of Casa Filho, he works with us, and we hope to be able to establish member cities both in Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina, and so on. And at the moment, there are really a progress in Brazil. We are really on the brink, hopefully, also to be able to have establish a city refuge in Brazil. So, and Mexico City is helping us with that. How shall a city be organized? How does a city come to be a city refuge? Two very different models from Brussels and Paris. Brussels is, there was a literary organization called Passaporta. It's a very wonderful organization in downtown Brussels. There's a bookstore, they're running events, they have literary residencies and so on. They decided we also want to have this become a member Icorn, not only to have normal, traditional literary residencies, but we want to have a real, be solidaric as well, and present and host a persecuted writer. So they decided to do that, and we said it's wonderful to have Brussels as a member Icorn. They said no, it's not Brussels, it's Passaporta. It's our organization joining. The city is the city, the capital of Europe, whatever, but we are the organization. Organization is signing in, and the organization taking part of it all. But after a while, the city came in. So now the mayor is paying for the flat. So they have managed to bring the city inside. So we started to say it was Brussels, and it's even more the city also. That is the organization. But the practical work is done by Passaporta, a literary organization in many ways comparable to the guild complex here in Chicago. Well, in Paris, we saw Paris in the film, and they are doing a marvelous job, also within Icorn. And but that is organized from the top, from the very top. It was the mayor he just resigned, but the Bertrand Delanoë who signed the contract, and it's the mayor's office that's running Paris City Refuge. They're inviting the writer, finding a flat for him, and so on. It's done from the very top, and it's done by the International Bureau of the Office of the Mayor. So these are two very different models. We are trying to approach also when we approach larger cities. I mean, Chicago could be one, but now we have hopefully the guild complex that will help us and see if we are able to establish it here. But then we have, it is when we are approaching other big cities, London and New York, and we don't know. We can point to Paris and say it's possible if there's a will on the top. It's possible to do it also that way, even though most of the time we are doing the Brussels way. We are identifying an organization, some people, that really want this to happen, and then it happens, and then the city is becoming involved, supporting and so on. Protection and promotion. Trondheim is a Norwegian city. They are run by the refugee council of the city. Just so the focus is on protection. It's possible to do it like that. And we have also a special provision in Norway. The Norwegian cities, the writers are coming in as UNHCR quota refugees. And then that means that they are able to stay also after they have been a guest writer for 2 years. So we have that special provision in Norway. It's not Manal can testify, I think. It's not only a dance on roses, like we said, even though we are coming to a Norwegian city, because of course your future might be a little bit more secure, but there are a lot of duties, a lot of difficulties by being forced to be a refugee, almost. So that, but it's life is never perfect, and it is for an organization like Icorn, it's fantastic to have the possibility to have Norwegian cities taking a Norwegian system. We are collaborating with the Norwegian authorities, of course, to bring writers in as quota refugees. I mentioned Malmö. There's a Swedish city is very, very active, promoting their writers in a unique way, and they are really moving forward, and they have managed to get very many other Swedish cities to join. Frankfurt was a city also back in the 90s, but in one of the first cities in the old system. They are, there's a literary organization running it, but it's supported by the book fair and by the city. So it's coming up in different ways. Girona is another Catalan city. It was Pen Català, Barcelona, that brought it in and brought them in, and now we have 2 Catalan cities, and maybe there will be more cities as well. But so Girona is one of the last cities that came into Icorn. This is a little bit about how it works with regards, how do the writers come in? Do we just go out on the street and see? No, it's not like that. Any writer in the whole world can apply to become a guest writer, to become a safe haven in an Icorn member city. But there is a quite comprehensive application form, 7 pages, and if everybody asks, are there other false applicants? Are many people pretending to be writers, pretending to be persecuted, and so on? And we believe, and also the people we are working with believe, that only this application form is kind of frightening quite a few people that would try to apply from, because it's quite rigid. But I mean, it's rigid, but it also flexible. I mean, the criteria are rigid or are strong, but running it, we are flexible. But you have to be persecuted, and you have to demonstrate that you are persecuted and document it, and you have to be, in the old days we could say you have to be a writer, you have to be a published writer, you know, but what is a published writer today? It's not the same as it was 10 or 20 years ago. But, and quality is of course a matter, but it can never be a definite criteria. So there are some of these questions that we have been struggling with, always discussing, you know, but we are formulating now that you have pursued and communicating. And the writer definition has also been extended. In the beginning, in the times of Samarosty and the former network, it was mostly novelists, poets, and so on. But now that we have journalists, bloggers, publishers, translators, poets, non-fiction writers, cartoonists, singer-songwriters, playwrights, and it's not definite. It's not. It can also be even extended more like that. So it's a really wide field. But I think that's also some, and I guess hopefully you will share my opinion also here in the US and in Chicago, that the borders are not that clear anymore. Very many of the writers that we are hosting, they are not only a novelist or only a poet or only a singer-songwriter. They are many things. They can be a journalist, they can be, so very many of the writers have a lot of different categories, and the genres themselves are overlapping more and more, or even melting together. I think you only see what a novel, documentary novel, for instance. What's that? It's a non-fiction or it's fiction, and so on. So these are questions that also are relevant to discuss when we are creating a system like this, because the question we need to know when that's the basic things that we are doing in the administration center in Norway, is to get the writer qualified and then to present him or her for a city that will hopefully invite this writer, him or her. We have an external application assessment system. We are working very closely with Penn International, that have their headquarters in London. They're also Penn American Center, of course, that you might know. So they have a writers in prison committee. They have an overview over the whole world about writers in prison and writers being persecuted and so on. So they have a network of 150 centers all over the world in about 100 countries, but they are also contacting very many other organizations and colleagues to be able to assess the applications. And all the writers, when they are applying, they need to have 2 reference to independent person that can confirm that they are who they say they are. So you will know that if you are Chicago is becoming a member of Icorn, you will know that when you are getting a list of writers that we suggest for you to invite, to select one to invite, you will know that this is we have done all that we could to make sure that this person is the person that he or she says she is. So, it's a new slide, please. So, since we started in 2006, we have been able to place about 100, a little bit more than 100 writers. But this is only the beginning, hopefully. And it's, again, I said we have placed, but that's not true. It's the cities, the member cities. Icorn consists only by and through the member cities. So when we are able to work together like this, all the cities between us, we are able to help and assist many writers. And hopefully this is, as I said, only the beginning. I'm going to tell a few stories just about some of the writers, just to give some, to share a little bit more about how it all works. So we can take the next slide, please. That's a person we know, Manal.
Yeah.
And we'll not speak a lot about Manal and Madsen now, because they will speak, of course, for themselves on Friday and Saturday. Manal came from Iraq a couple of years ago, some years ago, to Stavanger. He's a poet and a journalist, and also as a woman in Iraq at that time, it was impossible to work. And she has been in Stavanger, working also together with her colleagues in the other guest writers that have been there, current and former guest writers in Stavanger. And coincidentally, since approximately when you arrived, Manal, to Stavanger, the Arab Spring took off. And I think Manal is an example on what I said earlier about how active you can, as a writer, can work and do things when you are free and you have the possibilities to work, because she monitored and took part in the Arab Spring from her office far away in Norway. So I think that's a very, very important point, and we are looking very much forward to seeing more about you and to listening to you on Friday and Saturday. Manal, just next. Madsen is also here. No, not still from Palestine, Lebanon, but he's no resident of Iceland. I'm sure you will tell a lot more about that also on Friday and Saturday. I'm just mentioning now that not only have your own poetry been translated from Arabic to Icelandic, but also you have been working, that's fantastic, you have been working to translate Icelandic literature to Arabic. So that's a major accomplishment, and that I think is one sense that's one of the potentials, that when you get a writer in it, you can never know who it is, and I mean we never, every writer, every person is, as you all know, very different, but one of the very remarkable things in Reykjavik was that Madsen was able to start, of course, wanted to read his fellow Icelandic writers, and then also started to translate them, so they're also now published in the Arab world. So that's the exchange. The system of cities of refuge contributes to exchange of literature between many countries and in many ways. Please, another slide. Mansour Raji was the first guest writer in Stavanger, Norway. He came already in 1998. He is from Yemen, he's a poet and an activist. He was as a young man, but he was not popular by the dictator at that time of Yemen, so he was imprisoned, and he was 15 years in prison. 7 years food chains, and it's totally horrible, terrible story. That of course is, I mean, he's a free man. He was a free man already in 1998, but of course the history is following, and still it's not, even though he is in a city of refuge, life is not easy and so on. But he has been doing a lot. He has been writing, publishing collections of poetry, bilingual, Norwegian, and Arabic, but also he has been writing a lot in magazines, in Arabic magazines all over the Arab world from Stavanger. And that when Mansour came, that was also the time I started to work with first as a festival director, and after that also and also with Stavanger as City Refuge, and later also with Icorn. So Mansour has kind of also been following me all the time. So I feel very strong bonds to him. And speaking about the Arab revolutions, Mansour also took part from his office in Stavanger in them. And Icorn is situated in the cultural center, our office, in Stavanger, in the cultural center. And in this cultural center there also is an office that the guest writers can use, sit and work and so on. So one afternoon I was in my office and I heard some shouting, and I wondered what's happening. And then I just went around the corner. I could see a person sitting in the phone, and it was Mansour Raji, who was sitting shouting in his phone. And what was happening really was that he was speaking a very simple technology, speaking in a phone, but on the direct line to Sana'a in Yemen. And there was a big poster of him in the marketplace in Yemen, and there were thousands of people listening. And he was speaking from his office, only to the masses in Sana'a in Yemen. So that's also one example of how things can happen, and why it is such an important and also possible thing. I mean, it's really can make a difference. We cannot easily prove it, but prove the effect. But we can see that and get a concrete sense that it works in that way. Another one. Andrei Nekrasov is a filmmaker from Russia. He is quite famous for one film he made about Litvinenko. It was the Russian. He was poisoned with polonium and died in London. And Andrei Nekrasov made a film about him. And he also made a film about the war in Georgia and so on. So I think Andrei Nekrasov knew a lot earlier than many of us learned to know about Putin and about how difficult and how serious and how maybe dangerous he can be. I mean, Icorn is not about politics, but it's about political situations and it's about dictators, and it's not my task to say who is the dictator and not. But Andrei very soon learned in Russia that it was very impossible, very difficult to work when you made films that the government didn't like. So he was invited to the City Revolution also in Norway. He was maybe not, threatened to long jail sentences or death, and receive death threats and so on. He might also get that, but the Russian government tried to. The whole they did was that they very systematically made it more and more difficult for him to work. It's only by not giving him a grant, by not allowing him to use this and this technique and everything. It was simply more and more and more difficult. So in the end, he was not. He wanted to stay and work in Russia, but in the end, it was impossible because the government and the authorities, they made it so hard for him that it was not possible to continue. But of course now he is working, he was staying in that city, but sometimes they were very happy of receiving him in Haugesund, but sometimes that we asked him, how is it going? We don't know, because he's not there. He's traveling all over Europe. I mean, it's a free person, and he was traveling all over Europe doing research for a new film. So you cannot. That's also maybe a point to learn about preparation when if you are becoming a city refuge, is that you cannot kind of command the writer to sit in that house and write all the time, something like that, because that life is not like that, and especially not anymore, because the duty of a writer when he or she is free is to be is very different. It depends on what person it is and what the potentials are and so on. But another one. We saw Zihan Benzerin also on the film. She's a human rights activist and journalist from Tunisia. She was persecuted by the dictator there, but she worked when she was in before she came to Icon City also, but when she was in Barcelona or Icorn in refuge, she worked traveled to Brussels, traveled all over the places, to fight for democracy and human rights in her country. I was at the book fair in Gothenburg in a large literary event. She was there also talking, but then suddenly the whole show was interrupted by people in the audience, and that was Tunisian officials, sent by the dictator to try to silence her, even when she was speaking at the book fair in Gothenburg. But she stood up. She was a very strong writer, a very strong fighter for freedom of expression. And as soon as the revolution came up, she left Barcelona and went home and continued to fight there. So she had almost a year to go in Barcelona, but she chose when things were really loosening up and it was possible to go home, she went home. And she is now, of course, working back in Tunisia. Next. Khaled Harara is one of the new guest writers, one of the recent ones. He's a singer-songwriter and most especially a rapper. And he's already made a lot of impression in Scandinavia, also in Gothenburg, various. He was working in Gaza, but he was persecuted by Hamas because of the words, of course, because of what he was writing, but also because of the genre, because of the music. Rap music was seen by Hamas, obviously, as an American invention, and that was not, or kind of American, that kind of prejudices that very easily come up, and so it was too hard for him to continue. He couldn't, and he was imprisoned and everything, but he escaped, and he is now a guest writer or a guest rapper in the Icorn member city of Gothenburg. But I listened to him speaking just the other day in Helsinki, and he also made a very big impression by speaking about how terrifying it also is to come suddenly to a new place, and you have a limit of time. You are very free, but then how shall you use that freedom? And only after if one day goes and you cannot use it, then there's one day less of your period of free time. So that's also an experience, of course, shared by very many writers. And one of the many dilemmas and problems that are facing us when we are trying to work in this way, because life is, every problems are not at all solved. Many new problems and challenges begins when a writer comes to a new city. So this is, it's not heaven, but it is a refuge, and it's a possibility for the city and the writer to work together to create something good. We are coming towards the end before, and I hope that you will also ask questions. These are the city refuges per 2014. Very many you can see in Scandinavia. We are working with a lot of cities, also other places in Europe. Next to city we have Miami was a member, but there was a break in the funding, so they are now not a member anymore. Hopefully they will join in again. But these are how it looks like. We are working in France and in Switzerland and also in Central Eastern Europe and in the Balkans and so on. So we hope that many more cities in Europe will join after a while. But then also to the next. These are, it's not that, but yeah. No, actually, sorry. It was hard to see what was the difference between the sea and the land. these are not current cities, but there are cities that we hope that will join. Some of these cities that we have written here, we have worked a lot with, and it's just before they will join in. Some of them we have only just started to work with. But as you can see, there are many cities in Europe that we are working with, I mentioned. We are in contact with Penn Japan about hopefully not this year, but hopefully we will be able to establish a city refuge in Japan. We are working with Australian cities, Cape Town, Johannesburg, South Africa, hopefully, and also in Latin America. And Edmonton is sending a representative to the Icorn Assembly in Ljubljana next month. We hope that Edmonton will become the first Canadian city of refuge. And we have written in Chicago. There is also someone working in Milwaukee as well, very close. She might come here also so I will be able to meet her before I leave. So she was not able to come today. So Pittsburgh, Ithaca, New York are working. They are not yet members, but we hope that they will join. There will be other cities also in Mexico and so on. So this is what we do hope is that in some years we are going to speak in this meeting, I said next month, a new strategic plan for Icorn, and we're going to decide upon that between all the member cities for a new plan from 2014 to 2018. So we hope that when we come to 2018, Icorn is a really true global network, not a European invention, but a true global network. And I do hope that Chicago will contribute to that, and that Chicago might be the first or among the very first cities that will join this organization from the US. So I'm looking very much forward to speaking with you and to being with you the days to come, and I do hope that we will be able to work together also for this important case. Thank you very much. So, are there any questions, comments? Yes.
So how do writers who may be considered in need of being in exile, how do they find out about Icorn?
In the beginning, not many people knew about Icorn at all. Very many of the candidates came in via PEN International, because we were working very close with them, and they have 150 centers in 100 countries. So many came that way, and it started to spread from. I mean, in one period in the Iraq War, there were many applicants from Iraq, so it spread, regionally, nationally, regionally, in where it was really hard. But we see more and more that individual people also are coming. That even though we are not very well known, not in Norway, Scandinavia, or Europe, but slowly but slowly, people start finding out that this is something that works, and it can make a difference, and then it's worth applying. I can say also that we work with a lot of organizations, because we get many applications from writers, also writers that we are not able to find placement for. Then we are working with more and more different organizations that might be an alternative for this writer. So even though we are not able to find a writer, find a placement for exactly this writer, we are doing what we can to help. Scholars at Risk is a fantastic US-based organization which is working for persecuted scholars all over the world, working with universities. Scholars at Risk. They're based in New York, but they are now even stronger in Europe almost than in the US, but it started out in the US. So they are working for persecuted scholars. They're not working exactly the same way as we are, and there are lots of journalist organizations and so on, but it seems that really to do what we do, to provide long-term placement, provisionary but long-term, for persecuted writers in cities and working with cities like this way, it's kind of unique, but with Icorn. Yes.
Yes, you mentioned that you work with Penn International
Yeah,
and with various universities. I wonder if you work with other NGOs. I'm thinking of Human Rights Watch or the Committee to Protect Journalists or Journalistes Sans Frontières or any other NGOs. And in what way do you work with them? Whether it's just to have them spread the word about what Icorn does, or do you actually do any kind of activist or advocacy work with them?
Actually, Icorn's job is to make the possible, and we are not an advocacy organization, but that's why we are working so close with advocacy organizations like PEN, like Journalists Without Borders, and many others. So we are working with all the organizations you mentioned. One way that we work with them is that I mentioned the application system. International, when they are assessing an application, many times they don't have the resources only themselves. They have to speak to Journalists Without Borders and get a letter of confirmation from them, and also from Committee to Protect Journalists and so on. But another way, and increasingly, they bring in also applicants for us, or they refer applicants to us, because it's a persecuted journalist that they are caring for. They have been working with this journalist for a long time, but they don't have the solution when he or she cannot stay in that country, stay in that place, and then it comes to Icorn. So that's one way that we work with them. But we are extending the network of cooperating organizations all the time, because that's the only thing that makes sense to cooperate. And so we are trying to be as inclusive as possible also in that way. And I mean, we cannot. We simply have to. Yeah.
You mentioned before that the people who are repressing writers are becoming more intelligent, and I think there is a lot of it going on in the so-called democracies, and you have the recent examples of Glenn Greenwald, for example, in the UK, here in this country, etc. And when I look at the map of your cities, I sometimes, sorry, I don't want to sound cynical, but I sometimes get this idea that the baddies are always the same. I think that's something that needs a lot of reviewing. I wonder if Icorn is thinking about these things, and what are your plans in this respect?
That's a very interesting, very good question. One way, we have said that from an early stage that we don't want to be Eurocentric. So that's one way of kind of solving the issue. But still, the good guys and bad guys. This still question is still very much valid and still a challenge. We have which story should I mention? The filmmaker that we had there, Nick Russo. That was a time when there was a very good. Luckily, there are still quite good connections between Norway and Russia, since we are neighbors. It's always better to be good neighbors.
And Russia is giving refuge to Snowden, for example.
It was. There was a lot of talk about that actually. The president of Norwegian PEN at the moment is William Nygaard. He was the publisher who was almost killed because he published Salman Rushdie in the 90s, if you remember. And he suggested for the Norwegian government to invite Snowden to Norway. But that was a very much discussed issue, for instance, also within PEN International. Since we spoke about definitions, if I can speak about Snowden definitions, we said it's a very wide. We have a very wide definition, and so has PEN. But whistleblower is not yet one of. Like that. But if we should use that logic, Julian Assange would be legitimate because he is also a publisher.
Right.
So, but he has this criminal. And we are able to. We have in our charter that if you are a proved criminal, you cannot apply. But
he's not proved.
So that sorry.
He's not a proven criminal.
No, but he
it's
would.
Alleged.
No, Julian Assange.
Yes.
No, is alleged. Yes. That's right, but he didn't apply to us yet. But if he applied, we have to consider very seriously. But we have had Holocaust deniers applying. It's of course a very tricky issue.
Right.
And This one was also proved criminal, not because of his expressions, but for some other reasons. So we didn't have to. But it's of course very, very difficult to have make a city invite such a person. Maybe so. We totally depend on the cities because they're the cities that had the last word. But we're inviting. But I'm not avoiding your question. But it's really it's definitely our aim to work. You know, I said in Africa, we are trying to have cities in Asia, Africa, and also ideally we should have cities, member cities, very close to the areas where people are persecuted, because then it's not so long way to go back and forth and so on. Well, this is. I'm really glad you raised the question, because we need to be reminded about it, and we really are. I think, at least in my opinion, we should try to tackle that, and we should not be afraid of our governments. Sometimes, it was I mentioned Salman Rushdie. There's another famous writer philosopher who is kind of one of the fathers of the idea. Is the French philosopher Jacques Derrida. He has passed away for a while, but he was also very well known in the US and lived here a lot as well. He wrote very strongly in the 90s that in favor of a network like this, and he meant cities can do something that the nation states cannot. Right. And if but we say both yes and no, of course, because we cannot. We do have to follow. We cannot break the law when we take a writer into a city, because we have to adopt to we have to work with the governments to get the rights in, but the member cities are always very good at finding ways, and that's why it's also very good to have cities in many different countries, because a person that is possible to get in one country, we might not get into another country, and vice versa. So yes.
Funding. Who funds all of this, or how is it funded?
Basically, it's funded. By the cities themselves. The cities are caring for. The cities are paying for the housing. The cities are paying for the salaries for the writers to make him or her survive. And but the cities are getting. They are composed, as I mentioned a little bit about, composed in very different ways, and they also get their funding in very different ways. But in Norway, it's a very special example, because as when the writers come as refugees, the state are providing most of them the money for the basics. But the general rule is that the city has to provide for it. So Icorn as such, it's not a very big company, the administration and so on. We get funding from private sources, Sigurd Rosing Trust, but also from the Norwegian government, from the Swedish government, and different sources. But we are working very hard to get, like all of us are doing, of course, to get funding. But we need to be. Of course, we will depend probably also from governmental funding, but we also have to remain independent. So it's this question. I started to speak about Nekrasov and for the last question, because when he was invited to Norway, that was just before there was very, very tough negotiations about the Arctic areas between Russia and Norway, and we made sure to wait then there was the Prime Minister was signing the agreement, and everything was good, and the day after we sent the application to the Norwegian immigration. So then we managed to get him in. If we had invited Nekrasov, some weeks before, maybe the Norwegian government wouldn't have let him in, because they were afraid to provoke Russia. For instance, Norway, I'm saying a lot of positive things about Norway, but at the moment Dalai Lama is coming to Norway, and the Norwegian government wants to speak with him at all, because they're afraid from the Tunisia. We have insulted them once, and that was very costly. When we gave the Nobel Prize to Leo Chabot. Sorry?
Talking about Assange in Ecuador, have you tried to approach Ecuador for writers? Because I'm sure there are many Latin American countries which are now in a kind of very progressive stand, and I think they would probably be very good candidates for, you know, cities like Quito or whatever. There's a lot of interest in culture and so on in many different.
It's also a very good question. We do hope for many cities, as I mentioned now, but Colombia is going a very positive developments. We're speaking with some cities there, but also in Brazil and Argentina. I met with the Minister of Culture from Uruguay a couple of years ago, and he said we want to join. We hope that some of our cities will join. They are not there yet, but he said like this: it's payback time. He had himself been in exile when there was dictatorship in Uruguay, but he is now back, of course, and it's free. And he said it's payback time. No, we should do. I mean, we were taken care of. No, we should. So it's a duty like that. So it's a very good idea. I think it's there and there. Yeah.
Yeah, I came in a little bit late, so forgive me if the subject was question that has been covered. If there is a situation where there is no immediate life threat to a writer, sometimes it could be that leaving and going into exile could be one of the worst things that a writer could do, because it relieves the potency of his work. I come from a country where sometimes the persecution of writers and artists is designed to make it inconvenient enough for them to stay in Iran and to have them leave, because that relieves them of the embarrassment of putting that person in jail or killing that person and paying the political cost for that. And the idea is to remove them from that Iranian context where the potency of their work is not really as powerful as it is there. Once you're outside, a lot of times they think, you're just another person from hollering from and screaming from the outside of the Iranian borders. Who cares? What is your criterion for coming up with a solution for that? One that's very nuanced, and it's not a clear case of immediate life threat.
Again, it's also an extremely interesting question, and it's a question that is troubling us and many times. The criteria are strict, as I said, and they must be so and so. But then the questions raised are still very, very challenging, and because I mean, but most of the time, I think some writers, they don't want to be regarded as icon writers. They want to come out. They want to have. Sometimes we have some kind of translation troubles with refuge and refugee and so on. Even though we call the system Icon Cities of Refuge Network, but it's not refugees and so on. The Iranian cartoonist who was on the film, we showed the film in the beginning, he was a guest writer in Paris, and he's also an extremely impressive artist and writer. And I listened to him speak not so long time ago, and he was asked about, do you feel as an Iranian or as a French? Neither. I'm the resident of the internet, he says. Because he is, and what from Paris, he is publishing, and he has I think, I'm not sure if it's million, but it's hundreds of thousands and even more followers on YouTube and everything in Iran. He is free to do whatever he will in Paris, but he has so many hundreds of thousands of followers in Iran. But it's also, I think, answering also follow up another question. There is in the old days before the Berlin Wall, in 1999, we regarded mainly it was the bad guys who were persecuting the writers, and it was governments in the Eastern Bloc and so on. Now, as I also mentioned earlier when I spoke, but as we all know now, the picture is a lot more complex. So many of the writers are not mainly persecuted by the governments, but they're persecuted by, I mentioned, Hamas, Taliban, Al-Shabaab, all these different terrorist organizations. So it's not that the world is getting more and more complex. It's in many ways the world is getting better, it's getting more free, and hopefully there will be no need for Icorn sometime. But what we see, unfortunately, that the new world, the new technologies, I mean, I mentioned the new technologies are creating immensely very positive. It's a very positive factor for Icorn, as I mentioned, because the writers can communicate to their home country more effectively from exile than they could when they were home. But of course, the dictatorships and whoever, they are able to follow the trace and also the terrorist organizations.
Sometimes it's the local thug or the local mafia
That's
boss.
how it
In Mexico,
yeah.
most journalists get killed by the drug dealers.
Yeah. And the drug dealers has connection to the governments so it's complex. But we, I mean, and as neither one city or an organization like this cannot solve all the problems in the world, but we can do some concrete acts of solidarity and hospitality towards the writers. So that's quite much. That's one question, Ben.
First of all, thank you so much for coming here for this presentation, for the work that you're doing. It's so inspiring and important. And I absolutely am thrilled about, Chicago, the possibility of Chicago becoming a refuge city. So first I want to just comment on Angelina's comment. I also am sitting here thinking about my country, this country, and how writers are repressed here, even though it's a so-called democracy, and how we can resist that and create a kind of safe haven, even in a way that might not seem like it necessarily overtly needs it, and yet remembering the history of McCarthyism, and which was not so long ago, and tremendous history of persecution of writers and revolutionary voices. And then I think of Assata Shakur and political prisoners and the Black Panthers, who maybe aren't writers, but they wrote literature, they wrote their propaganda, and is there asylum for them, and poetry too, right? So yeah, like that's one place where my mind is going. And that's kind of just food for thought for everyone in the room. My question for you, which is kind of related, is you said something that struck me, that Icorn is not about politics, but it seems to me like it really is.
Politics is all over the place.
Say what?
Yeah, politics is of course all over the place. But I mean, and I think the idea, and I mentioned Derrida and everything. I mean, the idea and the ideal that cities can do something that nations that cannot. That is what we really have to not only dream about, but we try to realize the potentials of, from city perspective, both from one city, working with your city government and so on, but also what we as cities can do together that nation states are not capable of, or that what they are not willing to do. So I think it's a kind of I mean, we are experimenting all the time. Of course, we feel that we started in 2006. We feel that we have only begun. We are doing this together, and all the cities, when we are joining together in these annual meetings and so on, we are speaking, talking. How can we improve? How can we work more effectively, and how can we reach out wider? I can mention just one example to also to both to the questions about US and I mean where the rights are persecuted, because we are trying to be practical. Right. There was a paperless immigrant family in Norway, and there was they had a daughter, and she was very kind of bright and everything. So she managed to get into schools and get all the public services, even though she was paperless and everything. But then when she was 18, 19, she wrote a book about that, about her experiences in Norway as a paperless immigrant. And when that book was published, it was kind of a sensation and everything. And of course, she was very exposed and very vulnerable because the Norwegian government would just kick her out. So, but she applied to Icorn. So. From Norway. So what should we do? Well, we were, and they had become a very big case, and finally in the end she was arrested, brought into custody and was on the way to be kicked out back to Russia with her family. And but what we managed to do then was, and she was sent to Russia, but then she was taken well care of for a while. And what we managed was with a new member city of then Krakow, the city of Krakow, we managed to bring her to Krakow, to get to Krakow, inviting her, so she became a guest writer of Krakow. And then there was still a big political discussion back in Norway, so they managed to change the laws a little bit, so that especially working for her, Norway has not improved very much when it comes to paperless immigrants, but they managed to change laws so that after she was in Krakow, she could come back to Norway, and she's now working as a journalist in Norway. So that's just showing it. I mean, it's not a kind of heroic act or anything, but sometimes it's possible to do something and to even to be solidaric and try to avoid the stamp of the goodbyes distinction, the good guys, bad guys distinction. So, that's your question. We don't have much time more, have we? Or?
A couple more questions.
Okay.
I was curious to know what Icorn is able to do for the riders as they're approaching the end of their 1 or 2 year commitment, where the riders are able to go or how they're able to be protected, because I'm imagining that if they are given a place to live for a year or 2 and they're suddenly free to write freely and express themselves, and especially if they are able to communicate it back home, I can imagine it only creates more anger in their governments back home. So I'm curious to hear about what kind of help they get toward the end of that residency.
That's my speech number 2. But it's of course it's an extremely important question, and if we didn't regard that question important, I think we would fall apart as an organization as well. I think that was one reason why the former network also collapsed, was that it didn't think about this issue and didn't tackle it. But it's not possible to have only one strategy for this. I think as we are learning and we are, and it's impossible to have a perfect solution for it. But we have many different strategies. Some, I mean, what we say to the applicant, first and foremost, it's important, and we're stating that clearer and clearer. We're saying that to the writer who applies, your future is your responsibility. Even though, but of course, the member city and Icorn will help and assist as much as possible. But even though you have, it's a cynical thing and a rude thing to say in many ways. The first thing you say to a writer when it comes and finally is free and everything, but then you say you have to think about your future, you have to plan what's happening afterwards. But you have to do both things at the same time. So we say that the future is your responsibility, but the member city will do what it can, and Icorn as an organization will do what we can. And some of the writers, they are in Norway, it's a special solution as I mentioned, but some writers are able to go home. Not many have been so far, but it is possible in some instances. And then we are, for instance, one of our candidates, one of our writers went home to a country in Africa, and we said it was he wanted to, but it was also dangerous. So we alarmed PEN, Amnesty, and everyone to look out, and he could call us anytime if he was able to phone. So we tried, and we knew, and he kind of is sure that if things got too bad, he will be able to. I mean, we will try to help him together. So we cannot guarantee him a placement in our system, but we will help together with our organization to help him out. Someone are applying for asylum, someone are applying for, someone are able. We are sometimes we're able to host a writer a second time in another city, but we are trying to avoid. We cannot survive as an organization as a closed circuit system. So we're trying to work with the rights all the time, and then also it's not a, we say that Icorn is about protection and promotion. So promotion is a really important factor. So sometimes, I mean, there are success stories, but also sometimes a writer, I think maybe Madsen can tell about it in the next on Friday and Saturday. But I mean, some writers are doing so much and are so active, able to be so active and do so much that they are able to create more or less their own future on what they have been doing 2 years. But it's incredibly complex, but it's the question arises: what is the fundamental one, the most important one for our network as such, because we do need to have that on top of our list all the time, our priority when we are planning and we are trying to see. But it's a shared responsibility between the writer, the city, and the organization, and there are many different options. So we're trying just to fit, and that's also why I say we do only survive by cooperating with a lot of other networks. If we cannot place, if we cannot, there might be another university inviting them, there might be another organization taking care of it, and then finally after so many years, Mugabe dies in Zimbabwe, and we have no guarantee that it will be better there, but maybe the writers from Zimbabwe will be able to return.
Helge, perhaps we could continue the conversations casually during the reception.
Yeah.
It's all set up out in the hallway, so thank you very much.
Thank you.